Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we explore the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame, a video essay series on YouTube. We're once again not in studio. And in fact, this is going to probably become the norm after the next couple episodes towards the end of the year. But with Thanksgiving and everything, it was just a little bit too difficult to get everybody in one place. But how are you guys doing? Here with Jen Mofsanti and Paul Nelson, as usual. How are you guys?
It's cold. It's cold in Utah, Sean. It's very cold.
I am not surprised. It is. It has been beautiful here until like today, at which point, like yesterday, it was like 70, almost 70 degrees, somewhere in there. And then today, rainy, cold, whole deal. So we're getting back into it. Paul, I think you're experiencing some thunderstorms that haven't made it to me yet.
Yeah,
be interesting.
Big old. So hopefully we can stay together all through the recording of this. But I just heard a 10-second loud. The thunder is rolling, as Garth Brooks sang so eloquently.
So today's episode, we're going to get into the show Encanto, which I just saw last night. I don't know, Paul, when you and Jen saw it, but it's fresh for me. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, it occurs to me that Jen might have been recognized. Is that what happened, Jen?
Okay, so I was at a formal event this past weekend because I am fancy like that, and this was a work event. This was not just something I go do for fun. So I was there to be charming and to talk to some of the people that we associate with here in Utah. And I was introducing myself around, and I got about as far as, "Hi, thank you for coming this evening," when the woman that I was talking to said, "Oh, I recognize you from Out of Frame." And I was very surprised because this was a Libertas Institute event. This was our 10th anniversary.
I recognize you from that, but okay.
I mean, okay, but it was wonderful. It was very, it was a wonderful surprise. I was deeply flattered that she recognized me from this show, and she said that she'd been watching for a long time. And so, hi, Svetlana, thank you for watching. We really appreciate you.
Awesome. That's great. The other thing I wanted to bring up is because we haven't actually talked about it on the show yet, but we did do an Instagram live on Wheel of Time. So obviously, like the three of us had probably talked about Wheel of Time a ton in the lead up. And then it's been, we've been kind of silent on it since the show came out, but we're, more than halfway through the season at this point. And, we watched the first 3 episodes, like sort of together, and then did our Instagram live. Have you guys continued watching past those 3 episodes, and what have sort of your basic thoughts been as it has continued?
Yeah, I've kept up. I am up to date on all of this. As of this recording, I think we're up to episode 5. That sounds right.
Yeah.
And thanks. I hate it. It's, for a little while it was getting better, and then we had some backsliding in episode 5. I'm just really not excited about the show. Apparently, it might be popular. It's very hard to know.
I kind of doubt it. I think we're doing the thing where we're like sort of grading on a curve on this stuff. It's saying it was like the most watched, or it's like on par with, with some of the Marvel shows on Disney Plus or whatever. But like, it has a huge name and it had a huge following coming into it. So it wouldn't surprise me if the first 3 episodes had that, but it would be relatively surprising to me if you got people really continuing on that much from here. I mean, I'm also like up to date on the show, and speaking as somebody who's not read any of the books or anything, I have basically no idea what's going on other than like what my wife explains to me and it's always couched with like, okay, this is totally different, or this is completely wrong, or they just rushed all the way through this, or like they didn't explain any of this stuff, but here's some backstory that might help you understand what's going on. And that's pretty much the only way that I'm like in any way understanding what's happening in the show, because I don't care about anybody. I don't care about any of the characters, and I don't really know what's going on because there's very little of the world that's like fully fleshed out or explained. And then like half the stuff is apparently different anyway. So I don't know. It's weird. I think if I did not, like really, really, really love the genre, and B, like have, this show to do and just generally Out of Frame to do, I'm pretty sure that I would not still be watching it, because I don't even think about it in between episodes. Like I've gotten to a point where like we're talking about it right now. We watched it on Friday, or was it come out Fridays? And
yeah.
I completely forgot about it. Like by Saturday, it was just out of my mind completely. So I have a hard time believing that it's really like as popular as Amazon would like to claim, but also they're completely opaque about all of their data. So,
yeah, there is that. And it's already got season 2 greenlit. So
yeah, but they did that. They'd already done that.
Another year of this.
So yeah, I mean, it was greenlit before even the first episode came out. So, all right.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily have any issues with like the casting or anything like that. It's just not well done.
I mean,
that's confusing. It's rushed where it needs to be slow. It's slow where it needs to go faster. The lighting's all wrong. The costumes are just, we've talked about this amongst the three of us, but it's very clearly machine sewed costumes.
Weird. So weird.
In a fantasy series where they wouldn't have access to those kinds of things, it would all be hand sewn regardless.
It's like I said when we were talking about it on the live stream, the costume thing bothered me a ton because like it's one of these really little things, really subtle things in a way, but it really affects the verisimilitude of the entire world. Like if everything looks fake now because nothing looks like it would actually exist in that universe. And so it's such an odd thing because you'd think it's like sort of a nothing point, but it's not. It's a big deal. Like screwing that up is something that really takes me out of the world. It's as if, well, it's like Shang-Chi driving. I mean, they did it for comedy purposes, but driving an electric vehicle through the jungle, right? Like
yeah,
it doesn't work. Like you're pulling me out of the story for this. In that case, at least it was for product placement, and I could sort of tell. In this case, it's like I don't know what it's for. It's for just being cheap about how you make the costumes because you don't want to pay people to hand sew stuff
for Halloween Express, apparently.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know, Paul. You're oddly silent for somebody who's a big Wheel of Time fan.
My mom always taught me if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all. But I think I'm gonna go against that advice. This is one of the worst television shows I've ever seen in my life. And if it wasn't Wheel of Time and it wasn't for the show, I would have stopped after the first episode. And I probably honestly wouldn't even watched it because, as I've said before, Wheel of Time is not my genre, usually, not my cup of tea. Yeah. I don't really like fantasy stuff. I hate The Witcher, and that's actually a good show apparently, but I can't even get through that. So like this is Game of Thrones. I didn't like Game of Thrones either. So this was an anomaly as far as the books go, but the TV show is just the worst of the worst. You just bad all the way down. The only thing that I could say that is good is that the casting I have no issues with it, but other than that, the writing's bad, the videography's bad, the actions, the CGI is bad. I can't think of anything that's actually good. The costuming's bad. the changes to the story. Like normally, if everything else is good, kind of like some of the Lord of the Rings, they made changes from the books, but the movies were good. So okay, I can accept it. Like you made a good movie, so we can listen to your adaptations. But what they've done for this, it's just a bad show, and mainly because of bad writing, and that's not surprising in this day and age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably the more unfortunate piece of everything is that like what I'm experiencing with Wheel of Time is basically par for what I expect out of most of the entertainment industry at this point. It's like it's poorly written, it's poorly conceived. Like I don't really know. I don't know. It just feels like I don't know. Maybe it's just my expectations are too high in general, but like I kind of want a little bit better craftsmanship on stuff. And I get it. Like we're still in a world where, people do these fantasy series all the time and it's, a lot of times they're going to be not great because they don't have the budget. They don't really like, you're building a world from scratch and trying to put it on camera and it's tough. And I appreciate that. But this is a show that I was led to believe Amazon basically spared no expense for. Like they were putting in, tons and tons and tons of money. It doesn't look it in this case. And it doesn't really seem like it. So I don't know. It's kind of a bummer, man. Like I was kind of looking forward to this. And certainly, my wife was really looking forward to it. And it's just been kind of disappointing all the way around. But
Yeah, your wife and I have been commiserating with each other
I bet.
every Friday. Just what is happening to me? Why is this happening? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And we keep watching in part because, we are who we are, and we do what we do. But my goodness. And every single time we try to engage in any sort of nuanced conversation about this show with other people who are fans of the books, we just basically get shouted down as being purists, even though I have stated very publicly that I wanted there to be significant changes to the original story because it wouldn't be a good TV show if they stuck very strictly to the books. And like people like us understand and appreciate that. It's just that they changed the wrong things and in the wrong ways, and then made a poor quality show around all of that. And this show would be twice as good with half the budget.
Yeah. So
I said what I said.
I'm very sensitive to the argument of, oh, you're just a purist and things like that. But even if like I try to stay away from those criticisms because things have to change from books to television shows to movies. Like it's just different. It's a different format. Things have to change. But what bugs me the most is not necessarily the writing. I'm not really expecting that much from writers nowadays, especially for streaming television shows. But what I was expecting was this thing to look good and sound good and to not pull me out with the costuming, which we've talked about, but the cinematography is just bad. The CGI is just bad, laughable bad. Like not even, oh, it's a TV show. No, it's bad for a TV show. And they've spent millions and millions of dollars on this thing. There's no excuse for it. There just isn't. And like, that's not a purist thing. That's just, it's a bad show.
Yeah, this is the thing. I look at a show. So take a show like The Flash or Stargirl or something like that that's on the CW, where they are not spending, $10 million an episode on these shows, right? They're spending like $2 million an episode or something like that. Like I get it. When you try to do, King Shark or something like ridiculous on The Flash, it's not going to look perfect, but I'm going to accept it because I recognize that it's a limited budget show. It's on a fairly standard basic cable network, at this point. Or I don't even know if CW might even be a broadcast network. I don't remember
it's broadcast.
If you get it. But all right, so even worse, literally a broadcast network. They do not have the budget for this. And so I'm going to give it a little bit of slack. But like this show, I can't. give that kind of slack to, especially on, honestly, like Amazon Prime has done some stuff because, I would say that the cinematography and the CG for Carnival Row was considerably better. I think his Dark Materials, it's considerably better. Like Amazon has made some shows where they have not botched these kinds of things. And like, I don't know why you would do it for this. I don't know. Anyway, we should probably stop talking about this because the episode really wasn't meant to be about Wheel of Time, but it's just like, I don't know. It's just shocking to me that this ended up being that bad. Meanwhile, I want to shift gears a little bit before we get into Encanto. I want to point out that I'm actually very excited about The Witcher. Paul, you mentioned, so one of the things about The Witcher that I think is tricky for people, and I understand why you would have trouble getting through it. I was confused, like, because I watched the show before I'd read any of the books or tried to like get into the lore at all. And one of the things that I think is one of the most glaring mistakes of Witcher season 1 is that it jumps around in time so much without announcing it or letting you know. There's nothing in it that would help you understand that like you are bouncing from one time period to another over the span of like 50 years. Like there's huge time jumps that are happening, and there's sort of 3 different time periods happening simultaneously in that show. And it jumps around episode to episode, and you really don't know what's going on. I think if they had done a better job of just hand-holding the audience a little bit in that regard, I actually think that you and a bunch of other people would have gotten into it. But that said, having rewatched The Witcher a bunch of times, like it holds up really, really well. And it's a very, very good show. And I'm very much looking forward to season 2, especially because now that I've been seeing some of the previews, there's some things from the books that I'm really excited about. Jen, you and I were talking about the sort of sequence. I think it's the second book. I think it's the second book in the Witcher series.
I don't recall. It is one of the first 2, which are collections of short stories.
Yes.
About Witcher.
Yes. And
so, if you're looking for a place to start there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. If you're interested in the show, I would definitely check out the books. But the sequence that we've already seen where Geralt is with like this beast guy, and it's a very Beauty and the Beast kind of situation, except for more kind of horrific and kind of interesting, and I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. And the guy, speaking of like effects and costuming and everything, like from what I saw from the preview, it looks great. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But I don't know. I mean, it's weird. Everybody keeps trying to make the next Game of Thrones, but I kind of wish that they would just try to make whatever they are making, and not worry so much about whether or not it fits this other category. But let's what were you gonna say, Paul?
Yeah, so the Game of Thrones, everyone's trying to make Game of Thrones, but the one thing I'll say that I didn't particularly like Game of Thrones just because of the story. It's not for me. But what Game of Thrones, the television show, did right was make you feel like this world was real, even though it had fantastical, ridiculous things. Everything they did made it feel like you were looking at a real place, and you don't get that at all with the Wheel of Time. And it's the same thing that the Mandalorian has done so well, changing genres and all that stuff. But like you got to bring people in with everything, and it's all the little details all the way up to just how you shoot it and light something. Like it's and there's ways to do it that aren't expensive, so I'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Encanto. This is I don't have much of a segue from the other thing, but like I mean, I think one of the things Encanto did pretty well for me, and we'll get into the plot and everything else for Encanto in a second. But I think one of the things that Encanto did pretty well for me is actually suck me into the world and make me care about some of the people in the film. It's not a perfect movie by any stretch. We'll get into a lot of that, but let's talk about that. So this is Disney's newest computer animated feature film. It's I I don't know that I would say it's like particularly groundbreaking in terms of the animation, although a lot of the fabric and textures and stuff, I feel like they just continue to make incremental advancements on those kinds of things, and it just constantly always looks kind of fabulous to me at this point. But yeah, basically Encanto is the story of a young girl who is part of a family, the Madrigal family, that every one of them has some kind of magical power that is, I think, essentially bestowed on them by this house. It's kind of like you just kind of have to accept that for whatever reason this took place. Basically, the matriarch of the family, the grandmother, made a wish essentially in a very harrowing moment early in her life, and it generated this sort of magic house that was sort of driven by the magic of this never-ending candle and whatnot, and it bestowed powers on everybody except for Maribel, who was the main character. And so yeah, I mean, a lot of this movie is sort of it's about Maribel struggling with not having powers when everybody else has powers, but also the question of why she didn't get powers and why this is such a big deal for her grandmother, and the family sort of treats her differently than everybody else. And I don't know what Jen and Paul, what were your sort of top level first thoughts on Encanto?
I mean, it was a cute movie. It was very much a Disney movie, and it was enjoyable when I went to the theater to watch it. The only thing is that when I left the movie theater, I kind of left the movie as well.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, it was a perfectly fine movie. I enjoyed it. The music was fine. The animation was great. I mean, you would expect that from Disney movies. You're not going to get anything that looks bad. I think the thing that has stuck with me the most was the short video before the movie.
Yeah,
that hit a different level. I don't know if I don't
that
really
was
want to talk about it, but if you
we
go,
should. Yeah. You should definitely, if you're gonna go see Encanto, make sure you don't miss the short. That one's first of all, it takes you back to like very classic Disney because it's 2D, it's hand drawn animation, which you don't see all the time, and it's about a raccoon's family. It's about parenting. It's what it's about, and not passing on bad parenting habits to your kids. I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that was pretty moving. That was pretty excellent short. Encanto, look, I there's a lot of things that I liked about Encanto. I think one of the things, we've complained about a whole lot on this series and on this show in particular. I think we've complained a lot about Disney, especially lately, not really understanding morality and not like presenting people as good people, and yet still expecting me to think of them as heroes. And I would point to a movie like Frozen as a classic example of this. I mean, Elsa in Frozen was literally originally written to be the villain of the story, and then they found out that they had a banger of a song, and they decided to flip it around and try to make her the hero. But she is horrible. She does awful stuff to people. She causes tremendous pain and suffering and completely freezes an entire kingdom. She is the villain of that story, and yet we're supposed to be all proud of her because she learned to let it go or whatever. But letting it go is like the deaths of many hundreds of people, which we just sort of gloss over. This movie, I have to just initially commend that, like, I pretty much liked every character in the movie. Everybody was generally good. The villain of the movie, so to speak, is the grandmother, and she's not bad. She just lost sight of what was important, I think. And she did so for pretty understandable empathetic reasons, as far as I'm concerned. So I think, like, the story itself, I personally, I empathized with quite a bit. and I thought it was a pretty good story. And if I had kids and they were going to rewatch a movie a million times, I would probably prefer that they rewatch this over something like Frozen. I mean, ideally, I'd prefer that they go back to some other Disney movies from, the 90s and probably rewatch those if they're going to do that. But in any case, I enjoyed it for the most part. I actually have bigger problems with the music than anything else. I found most of it to be relatively forgettable. And in fact, I have forgotten most of it at this point. I literally watched it last night. I don't think I could sing or hum any song from it, except perhaps the very first song, which is Maribel. Basically, it's the exposition song where she's introducing her family. And man, everything else in that movie, I just feel like it's pretty forgettable. And I also, I gotta say, I don't love Lin-Manuel Miranda. I think a lot of people are very enamored with him because of Hamilton and stuff like that. And by the way, I've liked him as an actor. Speaking of thinking of like his Dark Materials, which I mentioned earlier, like I like him as an actor. I like him as a performer. Some of the music from Hamilton I'm okay with, but a lot of the music in this, it's just completely forgettable for me. And I don't really understand. Like, it's got a lot of his sort of same tropes where he brings in a little bit of like pop music and hip hop and stuff like that, sort of merges them with a little bit more classic, kind of musical style, but it's just not great. And also had a problem with the mix. I think a lot of the aspects of the mix of a lot of the songs made it very hard to understand what was going on, especially especially even the first one. I think there was just so much going on. But how did you guys feel about the story itself? Like, or do you guys want to maybe go into a little bit more detail on, Maribel's experience, Jen?
So the story itself, I actually found to be pretty relatable, and it's not necessarily because the writing was super awesome, but just from like a personal foible sort of standpoint, I do tend to put a lot of pressure on myself to be everything to everybody, especially in my family. And it's also not the healthiest way to live your life. And I am working on trying to be better about that and to say no when I feel overburdened and things like that. But it is a struggle. And so it was very relatable for me to see that up
Yeah.
on the screen. But other than that, it was
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel to a large extent. Like the thing let me talk about the plot for a minute. So essentially, I mentioned that sort of the grandmother is the villain of the story, and again, she's not a bad person. It's just that because this magic house and all these powers and everything else came from her trying to protect her little babies in a very tense moment where her husband had just been killed, and it's just she's basically on the run from bandits who are sort of this is weird to me anyway, because like there's no clarity on why the town was being overrun by warlords, but whatever. Look, the town that she was living in was taken over by violent thugs, and she has to run away. And in running away, her husband gets killed, and she has to, basically make a wish to protect her three little babies. And so that's sort of the driving thing for the grandmother from the beginning is this idea of like protecting the family and keeping everybody safe. And then she just takes it too far, as people sometimes do. She as the house became this protective shield against the outside world. It became very, very important to her that everybody in the family who got a magical power from the house has to use it and has to be perfect and has to be everything that they could possibly be. And of course, that puts a lot of pressure on everybody. And that's what I think is super relatable about it. I think one of the things that was really interesting to me about the movie in general, and a thing that I actually really liked about the film, is that the sisters and cousins and aunts and uncles and everything, like, everybody feels that pressure. It's not just Maribel who feels the pressure because she didn't get the power, right? She You have every reason to understand why she would feel pressure, because she's the one person who didn't get something, and so she just feels like she's not living up to anybody's expectations. But everybody else feels the same way, and they all feel that way because the grandmother has put so much pressure on everyone. So I enjoyed that, and I think that's a good story aspect. I think there were a handful of really good moments that sort of dealt with that issue, and I like the fact that the movie had a really clear theme. But yeah, I guess I wish it was a little bit less paint by numbers. You know, I don't know. I guess I kind of feel that way. Paul, what were your kind of? I mean, is that kind of in line with
Yeah,
how you
yeah.
feel?
I think I think paint by it's a little bit better than paint by numbers for me.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
fair. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but
it's we have our star rating, so I don't want to give away my rating, but it's higher for me than I expected going in. What I really appreciated most about this story is that our main character is Maribel, and as you said, she doesn't have a power, and her motivation, it's pretty clear. Like, her way she feels makes sense. We see the whole story through her eyes. But then as we start seeing the cracks in the foundation, the cracks in the house, literal cracks, she actually starts interacting with her family members and her sisters and her aunts and her uncles. And she realizes that they all have superpowers, but they all have their own issues. And I think that is a great message for the time we're in. Is we see, especially with social media and everything like that, we
yeah.
see all these perfect uh, Instagrammable images for everyone, and we think other people's lives are perfect, they have no issues, and we're the only ones that have this problem, when in fact, even like the perfect sister who
Yeah.
literally just makes flowers bloom, she is miserable. And
Yeah.
Maribel is so prideful that she can't look past this to love her sister, and until later on in the story. But it's a great message for kids. It's a great message for adults, frankly,
Hmm.
that to actually empathize with everyone, because most people are going through something, and
Yeah.
not everyone's life is perfect. And even if they're super strong, super beautiful, seemingly perfect, have empathy.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was saying. Like, if kids were going to rewatch a recent Disney movie, I'd kind of rather they rewatch this one than most of the other ones that I've seen lately. For that very reason, I think that is a very good lesson, and I think it's a wonderful thing to remind people of. And I think that Isabella's story, that's the perfect sister that kind of makes flowers bloom, I think is maybe one of the more interesting ones, because what it takes Mirabelle actually going to her and finally being a little bit open and realizing that, like, Mirabelle basically yells at her and is like, "Oh, you're perfect. Your perfect life. Everything is perfect for you. You've never had any problems." And then finally, Isabella breaks down and is like, "What are you talking about? Like, I don't want any of this. I don't want to just do this." And then I think that, while again, I feel like the song itself is a little bit forgettable, the experience of the song that they do together as sisters, and Isabella is sort of breaking free from the sort of perfectly manicured plants and flowers and whatever. She ends up creating a cactus, which is something she didn't know she could even create, and it's something that then kind of sparks this idea of like other things that she could do if she didn't have to feel this pressure. And I think that's just a kind of a wonderful thing.
I
um
also, I really like the way they framed that interaction too. It's when Maribel first realizes she needs to make amends with her sister to heal the house, she immediately starts blaming her sister
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
putting all the blame on her because she's perfect in her eyes. When in reality, the only one that can make the change was herself and take that first step. And gosh, that is perfect. That is
Yeah.
exactly what society needs more of, is that
Yeah.
more inward looking. What can I do to prepare a relationship, or even maybe not repair relationships, is make another personal connection with another human connection with someone,
Yeah.
is maybe they're not this evil, or not even evil, just this perfect person. Maybe it's me that's causing the issue. And I thought that was done very well.
I love that sort of Bruno. So this all sort of comes about because of another member of the family, who's Mirabel's uncle, Bruno, who's disappeared. Basically, he's sort of a estranged member of the family. And the reason he's estranged is because the power that he was given is the power to see the future. And in doing that, in having that power, everybody kept coming to him, asking him to give them their future, and he would predict it accurately, but they'd always ask him for bad things, and then they would blame him when the bad things came true, as if he was causing the terrible things to happen. But all he was saying is, this is what I saw, right? And they're all coming to him, asking him to let him know, like, oh, when am I going to die, or what, these kinds of things. And it's, so you empathize with him a lot. But I really, Paul, to your point, I think I really love the idea that, like, when Mirabelle is sitting there trying to wrap her brain around the idea that she has to make amends with people, who, by the way, she's not, like, it's not. One of the other things I actually really did like about the film is that none of the relationships are irreparable. None of the relationships are like people. This is not like Scar and Mufasa. They're trying to murder each other. This is just a family that's just not on the same page, basically, and nobody doesn't love each other at the end of the day, but they're all kind of in their own worlds. But Bruno is the one who has to remind her. He's like, no, you're missing the point. Like, you're the one who has to do something about this. You are the one who is in control of whether or not, you go rebuild this relationship. And you're right, Paul. I think that's something that more people need to hear. And I think it's something that our entire society could probably benefit from. So there was a question. We were considering doing it for the bonus section. For those who are new here, we for supporters of the show on Patreon or Subscribestar, we do bonus content where we usually respond to viewer questions and have sort of more in-depth conversation. One of the questions that we got that could be used for that, but which I think we should do here, is Disney and Pixar have made several movies that are set in various cultures around the world: Coco, Moana, obviously Encanto. Is this good or bad? Does it reduce cultures to products, or is this beneficial representation of global diversity? Obviously, Encanto is a movie that's sort of in keeping with Disney's, diversity initiatives and things like that. Although for my part, I will say it doesn't read that way to me. It doesn't read any differently than like an Aladdin does, which is to say that it's really just about people, and it's about a particular set of characters, and it does not it doesn't drive the kind of woke culture stuff. I don't know, maybe if you guys got a different perspective, but I didn't really get any of that. I got, they're just trying to tell a story, and I am always here for that all the time. I don't know, Jen, Paul, did you guys get a different take on that at all?
No, I agree with you on this one. It like you could have dropped that story into pretty much anywhere, any setting in the world, and
Yeah.
made like the jokes like fit the culture that it was dropped into.
It's a
But
very
yeah, it would have
universal
worked
story.
anywhere.
Like it's a very universal, like, family story in general.
Yeah.
And all of those
Exactly.
things I think we find super relatable because they're things that we've all experienced. Like your parents putting a lot of pressure on you is something that everybody has probably experienced at some point or another, or you just putting a lot of pressure on yourself even,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Disney's animated movies and Pixar's movies have done so well, and why they're so popular, is that even though they might be representing a different culture, like Moana, like Raya, like this movie, it doesn't really matter. It's a story about humans. It's a story about that connection that we have with each other, and that is pretty much universal. So, like Jen said, you could change the jokes and put it in any culture, anytime, and this movie would still work. And I mean, you could really do that with any Disney movie. Maybe even lions, you could make this work.
Perhaps crabs and flounders and various sea creatures you could do this with.
Perhaps.
Yeah, look,
talking furniture, even
talking furniture, or maybe even toys. You could do it with. You could possibly do it with toys.
Yeah.
Look, there's a lot. I think one of the things that I react to negatively with the kind of diversity-driven content that we talk about a lot. The thing that I think is wrong with doing that is when you are erasing the need to tell a story in favor of some political agenda. And I don't really see that happening here. And what I mean is, like, if this movie had a character whose sole purpose was to deliver like 2021 political screeds about racism or something like that, it would not fit the environment or the story or anything that they're trying to tell. It would be out of place, and it would be something that really didn't make any sense, except for you would see the agenda being worn on the movie's sleeve. And this movie doesn't really do that. And I appreciate that, because almost every time that happens in a film or a TV show or whatever, it's terrible writing. It's terrible storytelling, and it completely takes you out of the actual story. And also it's obnoxious because it's usually something that is sort of the opposite of the theme here, which is, understanding and forgiveness and trying to empathize with people whose experiences you don't fully understand, right? If you were to take this theme and then drop a character in the middle of it that was like, basically, men are evil, which, Disney does from time to time, like, it would really undercut the point of the movie. And also it would be, just terrible writing, because it would be somebody's sort of weird political agenda sort of ham-fistedly crammed into the whole thing. I think that's the thing that most people react negatively to. And again, I don't really see it here, so I don't really see that as a problem. But to the point of the question, like, do we think it's a good or a bad thing that Disney sets these kinds of movies in different cultures? Personally, I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't know. I think it's fantastic when people get an opportunity to experience a little bit of some other part of the world, even if it's not the perfect representation or whatever. I don't know. We talk about turning cultures into a product or into a commodity or something, but like, there's only so many ways you can introduce somebody. Like, you're looking at creating content for an American audience that, and you're taking elements of South American, probably sort of Colombian, Central American kind of characters, and you're Americanizing a lot of them, you're anglicizing a lot of it. But like, you're going to need to do that in order to connect with the actual audience. I don't see how that's a bad thing. I think all it does is really just make people just a little bit more open to, to taking a look at other parts of the world, and to seeing people in other parts of the world as people, as just kind of the same. And personally, I like that. I don't know. Jen, did you?
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the movie Luca.
Mhm.
And it was just such a delightful movie. And even though it's obviously geared towards, a very anglicized, very American audience, my husband, a first generation Italian immigrant, you know, it spoke to him in ways that other content hasn't before.
Yeah.
And when you have these kinds of movies like Encanto and Coco and Raya, I mean, it's not for the people who still live in those locations and cultures. It's largely for the first and second generation immigrants here. And
Yeah.
it's this wonderful blend that gets presented, and it's very delightful because you they tend to feel very seen and very appreciated, and everybody else appreciates it too, and in ways that they didn't think that they could before.
I think it also
I
adds
think
an
it's a
element
wonderful
of
thing.
yeah, I think it also adds an element of uniqueness and interest in to the story itself. Again, I'll pull back to something like Aladdin or whatever, which I think is very similar in the sense that like Aladdin is very obviously not culturally perfectly a representation of Persian culture, right? Like it is very much not exactly right in a whole lot of ways. It's first of all, it's like entirely anachronistic compared to its setting. But that said, it gives you a very interesting exotic environment that you are not familiar with that adds a lot of interest to the story. It adds a lot of like stylistic and sort of cultural details that you can sort of draw on as a storyteller, which are interesting and sort of fun to draw on. But as an audience member, it's just kind of neat, and it makes you wonder, like, what is that part of the world like? What is that part of history like? What are these people like? And again, I don't see any way that that's not a bad, like that could be a bad thing personally. But
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with both of you. I it annoys me when people get upset about that stuff. I mean, you see stuff like this all the time, not just in movies, but with like restaurants and stuff like that. And it's just kind of it just leaves me feeling like ugh, like why do you care about this? But
yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, if you're making art, if you tell a good story with relatable characters, it doesn't matter what they look like or where they're from, people will connect with it.
yeah,
And that's what Disney does so well. And we talked about the short earlier. I felt more like a raccoon than I ever have in my entire life. And never thought that sentence would ever come out of my mouth. But darn it, Disney did it. And like
uh,
it doesn't matter. It could be a freaking raccoon and you can identify it. I mean, the big one of the biggest movies of all time are about lions. Like
yep.
what? It makes no sense on the surface, but
It
I
doesn't
I
matter because it's about the characters, right?
exactly.
Like it's
Exactly.
just about the characters. I think one of the beautiful things about animation and about the medium itself is that you can do allegorical storytelling more in a more pure way than you can do in any other kind of genre. I think this is the same reason why I like fantasy stories and sci-fi stories and things like that. You can talk about themes and ideas in a really intense, really direct way. Talking about this short, for example, like so, I actually really don't want to spoil the short for anybody, but it's essentially about a raccoon, like a raccoon kit, who is experiencing some things for the first time with his mom or her mom, and the mom's trying to be protective and trying to keep the little baby raccoon out of danger, and that is such an incredibly universal concept. You could do it with any animal, like you could literally do it with any character that you could buy as having a parent and child relationship. So like you could do it with robots for that matter. I mean, you could absolutely do it with any type of thing. But I think the thing that's sort of magic about it is that it allows them to like kind of not pull any punches. And this story really doesn't. Like this story really like this 8-minute short or whatever, and it really like hits hard on parenting and the way that you like the way that even a well-intended parent trying to keep their child out of danger can cause psychological damage to a child long term by being overprotective, and by being protective in a certain kind of way. And like they really didn't pull any punches on that at all. And they can do that because it's not human beings. Like if they did that with human characters, you'd be like, oh, ooh, that's but like with raccoons, you can go pretty far. And they did. And, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I like it. Let's do scores. Let's give me your ratings for Encanto.
I gave Ghostbusters 3/4 of a star. I think I'm going to do that here too.
Yeah. Paul?
So I am grading this on I'm going to give it a star. I enjoyed it. I know I'll definitely watch it again. The story was good. The animation was great. I really have no issues with it. Like for me, I went and saw it last night, and the only thing that I found awkward is that I was alone by myself as a middle-aged man in a kids movie. But other than that, that was a first for me. That was an experience. I have never done that before. And I was like, I got to go see this movie to record this podcast. And this is the last chance I have. And well, here we go. But no, everyone should definitely watch it. I mean, it comes out on Disney Plus the day before Christmas. So if you have family and you don't want to take them all to the theater, wait a couple more weeks and you'll be able to watch it. But if you can, go check it out.
I was going to give it 3/4 of a star as well, but I think I will give it a full star. I have some issues. I don't particularly care for the music. I think that it's frustrating. I think we've lost kind of a lot from the Alan Menken kind of years with Disney. But that said, I think it's a very sweet story, and it's a story that I empathized with, as I said repeatedly, and it's something that I think at least shows something that's a good message, and I appreciate that. So we'll give it a full star. So I think that's what we do. 2 3/4. That's not bad. Not bad. Go see this one. It's a good one. All right. So that'll wrap up the main body of the podcast today. If you're a fan of the show and you're not already supporting us on Patreon or Subscribestar, check us out, patreon.com/outoframeshow or subscribestar.com/outoframeshow. Then you can stick around, enjoy our bonus sections. We're about to stick around. Everybody who is a subscriber will get a little bit of additional content here. But if you're not quite ready for that, still make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole deal. And please sign up for our Out of Frame email list. It's a great original content every week. New article. Plus you make sure you keep up with all the stuff that we're doing all the time. So with that said, thank you everybody for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time.